All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are diving deep into something that happens inside your computer billions of times a second, but you never see it. We're talking about the constant, high-speed conversation between your computer's brain, the CPU, and its short-term memory, or RAM. This is where the real magic happens. So just think about that for a second. You've got this incredibly powerful processor that thinks at, lightning speed. And then you've got this massive library of data where everything it needs is stored. So how do they talk to each other? How do they communicate effectively without wasting a single precious nanosecond? That's the big question we're going to answer today. To make this all super simple, let's use an analogy we can all get our heads around. Just imagine the CPU is a really hardworking student, and the memory is a gigantic library. The student needs to grab books to study and then, of course, return them when they're done. If you can picture that, you're already halfway to understanding how this whole thing works. Now, here's the thing. Our student, the CPU, doesn't just run into the library and start yanking books off the shelves randomly. I mean, that would be total chaos, right? Instead, it talks to two very important go-betweens. Think of them as helpful librarians. In the computer world, we call them registers. So the first librarian is the Memory Address Register, or MAR for short. Its entire job, its only job, is to hold the exact address of the information the CPU is looking for. It's literally like telling the librarian, hey, I need the book from aisle 5, shelf 3, position 7. The MAR tells the memory exactly where to look. No guessing. And our second librarian, that's the Memory Data Register, or MDR. This is basically the library's front desk. It's a two-way street. When you're checking out a book, the librarian puts it on the desk for you to grab, and when you're returning a book, you put it on that same desk for the librarian to put away. The MDR is just that temporary holding spot for the actual data. And this just perfectly captures why that MAR is so incredibly important. Can you imagine if the CPU just asked for data without giving an address? The memory would basically be like, which shelf, brother? This isn't a guessing game. You absolutely need a precise location for any of this to work. Okay, so we've got our student, the library, and our two librarians all set. Now we can finally look at the two main things that are always happening. Borrowing a book, which we call a read operation, and returning a book, which we call a write operation. Let's start with reading data. It's a super simple four-step dance. First, the CPU tells the MAR the address of the data it wants. Second, the read command gets sent out. Third, the memory zips to that address, grabs the data, and puts it on the front desk, the MDR. And finally, the CPU scoops up the data from the MDR. That's it. Simple, logical, and happens incredibly fast. And when I say fast, I mean it. But it's not instantaneous. Every little step takes time. So, for example, if it takes the memory 120 nanoseconds to find the data and another 30 to get it onto the bus, well, your total read time is 150 nanoseconds. In computing, every single nanosecond counts. You know what it's like? It's just like placing an order on Amazon. You give them a very specific address. You hit buy. The package gets pulled from a warehouse shelf and it shows up at your door. The right address is absolutely everything. So what about the other way around, the write operation, storing new data? It's a very similar process, but the flow is just reversed. First, the CPU puts the target address in the MAR, just like before, but this time it also puts the data it wants to save onto the front desk, the MDR. Then it sends the write signal, and the memory grabs that data from the MDR and stores it in the right spot. And of course, writing data has a time cost too. In this case, maybe it takes 100 nanoseconds to actually store it and 20 for the transfer, for a total of 120 nanoseconds. The key thing here is that read and write times aren't always the same. It all comes down to the specific hardware. A really great way to remember this one is to think of it like writing in a diary. The CPU has a new piece of information, it finds the right page, that's the address, and it writes it down. And once it's written, it's saved. Okay, so you've got these reads and writes happening millions, if not billions of times a second. So how does the system not just completely crash? How does it make sure a read command and a write command don't just collide with each other? Well, the answer is timing. Meticulous, perfect, synchronized timing. This whole operation is managed by a set of traffic cops called control signals. We've already met the read and write signals, but there are others like memory enable, which is kind of like the green light for the memory to do its thing. And then there's the clock signal, which is like a metronome, keeping every single part of the system in perfect rhythm. Now, computers generally use two main strategies to keep this rhythm. The first is called synchronous transfer. This is where everything marches to the exact same beat of a single shared clock. Every operation starts and stops on a clock tick. The other way is asynchronous transfer, which, well, it doesn't use a common clock. Instead, the parts use handshake signals, basically sending little messages back and forth saying, "Hey, I'm ready," and "Okay, I got it," to stay coordinated. The best way to think about it is like a really complex, high-speed dance. All the parts have to be perfectly in sync. Because if the timing is off by even a fraction of a second, the whole performance just completely falls apart. You get corrupted data or even a total system crash. And you can see the direct impact of that timing right here. If a computer's clock ticks every 4 nanoseconds and a specific read operation takes, say, 5 of those ticks or cycles to finish, then the total time is pretty simple math. 5 times 4, which is 20 nanoseconds. A faster clock means faster operations. It's as simple as that. Okay, we've gone pretty deep into the technical side of things, but why does any of this really matter? It matters because this fundamental process is what dictates your computer's overall performance. It's why your apps launch fast or why your games run smoothly. And hey, for any students watching, you can bet this stuff is going to be on the final exam. So if there's one thing you take away from this, it's that system speed isn't just about having a fast CPU. It's about the whole package. It's how quickly the memory can respond, how fast that data bus is, how efficient those control signals are, and which synchronization method is being used. All these tiny details have to work together perfectly. All of those different factors boil down to a single key metric: system bandwidth. This number tells you the absolute maximum amount of data that can be moved per second. So in this example, a system with a wider data highway, a 64-bit bus, and a faster clock, 200 megahertz, can theoretically move a whopping 12.8 gigabits of data every single second. That's the ultimate measure of this communication highway. And for anyone studying for competitive exams, this slide right here is your cheat sheet. Seriously, you have to know the role of the MAR and the MDR. You need to be able to walk through the read and write cycles. You should know how to do the simple access time calculation. And you definitely need to explain the difference between synchronous and asynchronous transfer. Nail these concepts and you'll be in great shape. So we'll leave you with a final thought to chew on. Our whole analogy worked because the student was getting a book that was actually in the library. But what happens in computing when the student needs a book that isn't there? Well, that question opens up the door to the really cool worlds of cache and virtual memory. But that's a story for another explainer.